everyone, I'm Ricky Levon, author of The Golden Image. In this author advice, we will briefly go over some pointers to writing biblical, inspired narratives. Novels can be inspirational. Yes, fictional stories can have a message. Often we only think of the self-help category, commentaries, news articles, biographies, and other non-fiction books as a means to convey information and inspiration. Nevertheless, fictional stories can do the same thing. Often it's through stories where people are inspired to do something great. We can read a great book and then learn how to accomplish a task, relay information to others, or be inspired to make oneself better. How many times have you told or heard a story that was not only entertaining, but stimulating to do something, great? This is the power of stories, albeit if it's short stories, allegories, novellas, fables, tales, parables, or even novels. All can be wonderful for the people that read them. Now, biblically inspired narratives can be the same. Now, notice how I said biblically inspired narratives. This is different than narratives that are biblically based. It sounds like the same, but it's actually different. For you see, stories and narratives that are biblically based is often the movies you read that are retelling parts of the Bible in a longer form. For example, in movies for films like The Ten Commandments, Passion of the Christ, Exodus, Gods and Kings, the Bible miniseries, and even The Prince of Egypt would all kind of be examples of narratives that are biblically based. Now, it's funny that three of those that I mentioned was actually centered on Moses. This very, very common character to tell a story on. Now, in some cases, the stories are accurate or close to the biblical story, while there are cases where they are a bit far apart. Now, there are some stories where they use characters from the Bibles, or it's completely fictional account of a character or something, but it could have taken place during the biblical times. A great example of this is Ben-Hur, whether it's a book or either movie. That's a great example. But biblically inspired narratives are stories that use the themes or information from the Bible and then write a story with a similar message or idea. One of the ideas I could possibly use is the book itself that we're referring to, The Golden Image. And that the stories there are all use biblical scriptures as a base for the stories, but they themselves do not take place in the same time frame or tell the story exactly like that of the biblical story. I kind of hope that makes sense. But anyway, here are a few pointers on writing your own biblically inspired narrative. The first thing you want to do is come up with a broad sense of your story base. Meaning, does the story comes from first and then find biblical text to fit that story? For example, you have some type of story, then you have biblical text to fit it. Or do you have the biblical passage that you want to do a story from? And you can write your novels and your stuff from there. For example, The Golden Image was first set up as a means of telling different stories loosely based or inspired from the Bible, more specifically from young people. But anyone could have actually had an inspiration for those stories. First, though, my first clue was to definitely try to use the younger generation in the Bible. Now, once that happened, then it was a matter of finding the stories in the Bible where young people are the main part of the scripture. And then after finding those scriptures, there was a matter of trying to create a story to match. The next thing that you want to do is to simply read the portion of the Bible that you're about to read, and then of course study it. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be an expert, but you want to make sure that you have a good basic understanding of its message, or at least what's going on. And this could mean specifically that what happens in the story. Like, for example, Noah overcoming a natural disaster, and you're comparing that to someone who's overcoming a hurricane. Or it could be how a message is related. For example, if you want to look at Queen Esther and how she trusted in God to be able to influence a king, while a modern day story could be someone who has the faith in God to be able to influence their CEO to make a big change. Now, one of the last things you want to be able to do while at least setting up this particular story is to relate the biblical story or passage from your story. Obviously, that's the main crux of your story, but you definitely want to be able to do that. And for example, in the Golden Image, the first story there is prime position. Now, it is actually based from 2 Kings 22, where Josiah wanted to reform his country, and this meant changing some standards for the people. Now, in Golden Image, the main character there was a leader from the school, and he learned of some disturbing practices that was happening at his high school and decided to make a change. Now, this similarities technically end right there, but the basic message from the Bible to Golden Image is similar. A person of power has a desire to make a change to maybe alter the culture of their people, albeit the entire country, or maybe it's just a high school. But as you can see, you can take a story from the Bible, change it up a little bit, or at least be able to mold it, and then be able to write a story that's crafted from there. Now, after that, you figured out the story and exactly what you want to write. Then all the other basics of storytelling comes into play. This means the plot, story, characters, places, and so on and so on. And this relates back to how a story is written, but hopefully this gives you just a little bit of a background, a little bit of a backbone, or some information to be able to help out on when you're trying to write your biblically based narrative. For enjoyment of a book that does take biblical stories from the Bible and move them to current day, then of course check out the Golden Image. There are 13 stories, and the scriptures there, but that they inspired the stories, is all listed at the very beginning. Thanks for your support, and I hope you have a great time writing that next biblically inspired story.